You are all set as long as you can see it. Does that look good on your end?
Yes, that's great now. Yep, it's full screen.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Haley.
Is Jim Grace on it?
This is
Oh,
my second go around on this farm succession planning talk. Um, by way of introduction, I am a retired dairy farmer in Western New York. Came home in 1968 and went into partnership with my dad. And then in 1986, my brother came home from college and we had a three-way partnership. And then my dad retired mid 90s and it became just actually at that time an LLC with my brother and I. And then his oldest son came in to the partnership into the LLC in the mid 2000s. And then I was bought out in 2017. So I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit of my personal experiences along through the talk, and I hope you'll find that interesting and useful. So next slide, please. Uh, as I said, there we go. New York FarmNet, I've been working for them for 7 years now. And New York FarmNet's based out of Ithaca. We're a not-for-profit program that provides free, confidential, and on-farm consulting to any farmer or farm family or agribusiness employee in New York State. And we come right to your kitchen table. So everything that we talk about is confidential and stays that way unless, of course, we want to share information and work with an attorney or a lender or a consultant or something like that. We have a little over 40 consultants throughout New York State, and we work in teams of two. One focused on the financial issues, that's me, I'm a financial consultant, and then another focusing on family or personal issues. And the consultants, we only work in New York State. A lot of times not a lot, but sometimes we'll get requests from bordering counties, and we are sorry, but we can only serve if you live and your farm is in New York State. And you can call the New York FarmNet 24/7, and there's an 800 number there, or you can visit the website and request for services form. So you call down to Ithaca, and then they will assign the case, and we will get started. New York FarmNet has been around for a while. It was founded by the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences in 1986 and currently based in Ithaca as part of the Charles H. Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management. And we're primarily funded by New York State Ag and Markets and New York Office of Mental Health. Okay, Ellie, next slide, please. So let's get started. Let's do it now. And that's going to be one of the themes that I want to emphasize tonight. Is let's get started. Let's not leave it. Let's not wait until mom and dad are in their 70s or even 80s. Let's talk about it while the kids are young and we've still got lots of options to consider. The earlier, the better. Only 25% of farms have identified a successor, and a majority, 75% of farmers will never retire. I know you hear this all the time. I thought farmers never retired. Well, most of them don't. In my situation, I retired in 2017, and it was the right thing to do for the farm and the family at the time. Ideally, this process starts when the younger generations is in their 20s and 30s, and that doesn't have to necessarily just be family. It could be non-family members. But too often we deal with younger generations. They're in their late 40s or 50s, and mom and dad are in their 70s. I've got two cases actually on Friday. And the first one, thankfully, the son is in his mid-20s, and mom and dad are in their late 50s. So we've got some time to get things figured out. When I leave that case in the morning, the one in the afternoon, Mom and dad are in their 70s. Dad has already had 2 heart attacks. And the son, quite frankly, is considering that he might leave. So options are very limited in that case. So the earlier we can start, the better. Okay, next slide. So it's really important to understand the current farm structure. Who owns the assets? Who owns the debts? And what are our goals and needs for the business, retirement, and inheritance? So often we go onto these farms, and particularly mom and dad are holding the finances pretty close to the vest. And the question is, well, what do you need that for? Well, if we're going to help this farm family, we do need to know who owns the assets. Is there any debt? Who owns the debt? And then what is your plan for this business? Is the business goal to fund your retirement only, or do we want the business to continue? And what about inheritance? And are there other family members involved? And how is that going to affect our decisions? Okay, next slide. So there's quite often family tensions, farm tensions that go with this succession planning. And so I got 5 of them here. Letting go versus retaining control. You know, so many times the older generation really doesn't want to they want the younger generation to take over, but they really don't want to let go of control. So the transfer of knowledge and management is very, very important. And I was lucky in my case. My dad gave me enough rope to hang myself, I guess. He let me make decisions and make some mistakes and learn from them. And I was able to start right into the business when I came home from college. But this is very, very important. A lot of times I see the son has never seen the checkbook. He has no idea what's going on, if the business is profitable. And this is very important to bring the younger generation in as soon as you can. And another big and important part of this is fair versus equal, on-farm siblings versus non-farm siblings. I'm actually working with a case now, a couple in their 80s, wanting to transfer the farm. They have got 5 children, and the son has been on the farm his whole life. He's in his 60s now, and they want to treat all the children equally. Well, the fact of the matter is it's probably going to result in the farm being sold in the end. So I'm a very strong believer in fair rather than equal. And my dad, early on, I had 2 sisters and there's 2 boys and two girls, and my dad made it known early on, if you're not going to be on the farm, don't expect to inherit it. And so there was no surprises. And my 2 sisters did not expect to inherit any of the farm. So profitability versus affordability. It's very difficult to transfer an unprofitable business, obviously. And we do see this sometimes. And why would you even want to? And the next generation obviously has to look a lot of business changes if they're going to make it profitable. And so many times, I'm out here in Western New York. We have some very, very large, particularly dairy farms and fruit farms, where the balance sheet shows total assets in the tens of millions of dollars. And so gifting just has to be part of the consideration for it to happen. The business can't afford, and the next generation can't afford to buy all these assets in a lot of cases. Assumptions versus actual conversations. This just comes down to family communications, and this is where our personal consultant comes into play. So many times mom and dad say that they want to transfer the business, but when it really comes down to the actual nitty-gritty of doing it, that's a different conversation. So it's important that we identify, the assumptions and what they really intend with the business going forward. Progress versus stay the same. Well, this is a tough one. If we come into a business that's milking, I'm a dairy guy, so I relate everything to dairy. But we've got a 50 cow tie stall barn with a pipeline, and they put a pipeline in 1960, and it takes 3 people to milk. And maybe mom and dad want to be done with the business, and we need to hire 2 more people just to do chores. This business is not obviously competitive and has not made the changes that it needs to make over the last 20 or 30 years, really. So that's a big one, and sometimes it's a hard conversation to have, but these businesses they just can't be continued on for the next generation because there's not enough income there to make it happen. Okay, next slide. So we got a few things to consider for a successful transfer. And the next slide. This is a really, really important one. Build a team of advisors that everyone respects, including consultants, accountants, lawyers, tax specialists, financial planners, and lenders. In my case, we started with New York FarmNet, and my wife and I really liked the consultant that we had. And FarmNet assigned a different consultant to my brother, and he just hated FarmNet, and it went nowhere. And we finally brought together our accountants, attorneys, and tax specialists. We were with Farm Credit, so we brought their tax attorney in. Our lender, which is very, very important that there's up to date on just what else is going on. And then financial planners. So this could be generally people that are looking to sell you life insurance, but not always. And they can bring an immeasurable amount of knowledge and ideas to the table on what ought to be done. One thing I will say that FarmNet, we do not offer legal advice or tax advice, but we can get you headed down the right path and get some of the thoughts and the ideas out on the table and help with the communications in the early days. But this is so important to get advisors that everyone respects, so that it's not just the older generation or the younger generation's kind of hired guns that are trying to get this done. Okay, next slide. What does each generation own and owe? We really need an up-to-date balance sheet. And this can be a struggle. I've had the older generation, well, why do you need that? If the son has been there or daughter's been there for 25 or 30 years, she may have bought some cows, or she may have bought some machinery or what have you. And so he or she may own some assets besides mom and dad. But we do need to have an up-to-date balance sheet. And you would be surprised the number of farms we go on that this is a real struggle. We have to sit down and figure that out. So, but this is something we need to know so that we can decide what we're working with. Okay. So what is the goal of the farm owners? And the transfer can occur in steps. It doesn't have to happen all at once. And I actually prefer doing it in steps, particularly if we started early in the life of the next generation. In my case, I bought into cattle and machinery, and when I first came home and didn't have anything to do with the real estate, my folks owned all the real estate for several years, and I think this is a good way to go. And in the size of some of these businesses these days, it just isn't possible to transfer the whole thing. So we generally like to break it down into one or two parts with the operating assets, and that would, if you were a fruit farm, it'd be your rolling stock and all your equipment and your totes and all that sort of thing, or vegetables, the same sort of thing. Okay, that's next slide. What are the strengths and the weaknesses of the parties? So a lot of times, maybe dad has been doing the cows, and the son or daughter is a specialist with the crops, or if it's fruit, different areas of production or marketing. And if the older generation is going to step back, who's going to take that role? Who's going to manage the other part? And sometimes we get the next generation, and we've got, say, two sons that both love to drive tractors, but they don't want to manage the finances or the cows, or the production of fruit or the vegetables or what have you. So we need to decide where the strengths and weaknesses of the parties are, and agree how we're going to handle that going forward. Okay. Next one. How is the business financially now? And this, just like the balance sheet, we do need an up-to-date profit and loss statement. And this, I mean, to start with now, I mean, if I had something from January 1 of 2024, last year's P&L, that would be great. Even an up-to-date one that is right up till the end of October would be even better. But we do need to know, is the farm making money now? Is it financially viable? And if it's not, why not? And in the case, this picture here, maybe the son is suggesting some things that need to be changed for the farm to be profitable. So balance sheet and a P&L statement are very important in this process. Okay. What are the family living needs? Is there off-farm income? Boy, this is always a tough one. When I ask, how much does it cost you to live? Well, the answer so often is, doesn't cost us hardly anything. We get our gas out of the farm tank. The farm pays for our heat and our electric. We get beef and milk from the farm, and the list goes on. And so if one of the family members, the older generation, is going to leave, we need to identify how much it's going to cost to support them in their retirement. And we do have worksheets that we can help you work through to get a handle on this. But you would be surprised the number of farm couples that really don't have any idea how much it does cost to live. And too often I see one checkbook with the family living and the farm all in one. And we really urge people to have two separate checkbooks and try to identify and keep separate farm business and family living. Okay. Next one. Has transition of management occurred? And I've talked about this a little bit already, but if the son is in his 40s or 50s and really hasn't been given any management, he's really been cheap labor, and that's all, there's going to be a real awakening on the day that the business is his, and he's got the responsibility for everything, and he doesn't have any experience with managing the business or trying to troubleshoot problems, manage labor, and so on. So this goes back to uh, giving the younger generation management responsibilities early on. Doesn't have to be everything all at once, but so that they can work side by side. Okay. What is the timeline in the communications of expectations? So often mom and dad have got one idea and they're going to farm till the last day that they're able and be in control. And the son maybe would like to have had an opportunity to be involved much earlier in life. And the communications of those expectations is so important. And so often we hear mom and dad, well, we want him or her to take over. We really do, but we haven't done anything to make that happen. So, it's really important, and we get to a point where in some cases I've seen where dad said, well, I'm ready for you to take over. Son is in his mid-50s, and son says, dad, we've bought a house in town and we're leaving. And he just put that off too long. So we want to try to avoid that situation. Okay, next one. So there's a lot on this page. What are the estate plans? Does everyone have a will? And I talked about, equal versus fair, how you're going to treat. If there's other siblings that are off the farm, how are you going to treat them? And for gosh sakes, everyone has got to have a will. That's where we really need to start. Uh, we can get ourselves into a world of hurt if both parents pass away and there is no will. New York State law, it'll go to the surviving spouse, but we really need to have a will. Uh, so important, and you'd be surprised the number of people that don't have a will. I'm sure everybody on this call today has a will, right? So Medicaid protection. This is another thing. You all know the cost of long-term nursing home care. And there are some things we can do with property transfer and irrevocable trust to protect ourselves from nursing home long-term health care. But those things need to be done now. I mean, in the case of an irrevocable trust, there's a 5-year look back on that before it kicks in. But we need to think about those things, and not everybody needs to. I hope that I'll be able to stay at home. I'm pushing up towards 80 now, and my wife reassures me that I will be. But you just never know what your health and needs are going to be going forward. So that's another thing to look at besides the will is Medicaid protection, and are we going to have to let the nursing home take the farm? Which will be the end of it. And a touchy subject that I hesitate to bring up, but in this day and age, what about divorce and prenups? Particularly when there's several of the younger family members coming into the business. Boy, it can really create a stir if maybe the wives don't get along and one wife eventually divorces her husband, and what is that going to do in the settlement to the farm? So while everybody loves each other and everybody's talking to each other, is probably the best time to talk about this. And do we want to do prenups? And they are not they're not the best thing for everybody either, but they can offer some comfort and some protection in some cases, something we do need to think about. And will the farm survive? I mean, if all of these things above aren't taken care of, there's a good chance that the farm might have to be sold. Okay, next slide. So communicate, and keep at it. In my case, I think it was 2 or 3 years before we finally got the last buyout situation for myself and my retirement taken care of. It's something you just have to work at all the time. And I know there's busy seasons of the year, and there's other times. We're coming up one on now. Between now and next spring, that's the best time to devote to this and get started on it. And it's going to take a while. It might take a year or two to do, but got to keep at it. Okay. Next slide. So this is almost a review in reverse. There's 10 pitfalls here of succession planning, and we'll take these one at a time. So next slide. There we go. Okay. Thank you, Haley. So waiting too long, and I've talked about this on a couple of cases I have right now. You wait so long that the next generation decides that they're never going to have an opportunity and they just leave. Or the farm business doesn't change. And I've described that where maybe we're operating under a model that worked in the 1960s, but really doesn't work today. And so we've lost our competitiveness, and makes it very, very difficult. And I think one big thing about bringing the next generation in is you bring in new blood, new ideas, new thought processes, and new energy, and it really helps to change the business and bring it along. And obviously, today's a good example. We've got election day, and depending on how it all turns out, our tax laws may or may not change. And so what may be appropriate today, if we wait 5 years or 10 years, that could be a problem. Okay. Not defining succession goals. So we really do need a timeline, and we need to measure our progress. This comes down to communications, obviously. I'm going to bring my son in 5 years or 10 years or next year. That needs to be written down. It needs to be defined so that both generations know what to expect. And so often we don't have that. And then we get to a crisis situation and everything needs to happen in a hurry. And our options are very, very limited. Okay. Not grooming the next generation for management. Well, we've talked about this, and there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but so often I see that the next generation has really been just cheap labor. And maybe I've seen situations where son in his 40s just got married. Up until 2 or 3 years ago, he was living with mom and dad and pulling down $400 a month or something like that. And not realistic if he's going to support his own family. And we do need time for side-by-side management. If we wait till the last hour to transfer things over, there's just so much to grasp all at once by the younger generation. So we need this period of time working together, managing the business and making decisions and changes. And like I say, we do need to allow the next generation some responsibility. We need to step back and give them something that is just theirs and let them make their own mistakes. And then we need to communicate. We need to review performance. So often we go in and ask, well, does the family have, how do you communicate? Well, usually while we're riding back in the pickup or on our way to breakfast or while we're doing chores, we really need to set aside a time, ideally a few minutes every morning, but at least weekly, that we communicate where the business is going, what we expect to be done, and review the performance of all the partners. Okay, next slide. Write an agreement, but don't implement. Oh boy, we see this one fairly often. Um, we'll write up an LLC, but no assets got transferred. So we have the agreement, but there's no teeth into it. There's no substance to it. So we need to make sure to transfer assets, whether that be cattle and machinery or uh, rolling assets on a crop farm, what have you. And then we need to be sure to keep the capital accounts current. And by that, I mean how much each generation owes. And if the younger generation is buying in, how much does he owe and how much does he own? And keep that current every year with an inventory so that we don't get 5 or 6 years into this thing and think we're at one point and we're really not as well off as we thought. So yeah, so very important there. Okay, next one. Implement a plan without understanding. These things can get pretty complicated. They really can. And you just need to ask a lot of questions, and that's all I can say is just ask an awful lot of questions. If FarmNet can't answer you, the attorney can or the lender, but ask lots and lots of questions. And one of the most important things nowadays, we mostly do LLCs, limited liability companies, an operating agreement, but we want to make sure that there's a buy sell too. Very, very important. In case things don't work out, what are the terms, the agreement that we're going to be able to, one partner buy out the other and still remain speaking after it's all done with. But ask lots of questions. If you don't understand, there's no stupid questions. Ask till you do understand. And make sure that the spouse understands as well. I really recommend that these meetings include the spouses to the extent that is possible. Okay? So lack of personal and business objective transparency creates mistrust. Well, this is just obvious, isn't it? I mean, Dad said he was going to transfer the business over, and now he's had a couple of heart attacks, and it's still not happening. And the son really doesn't know where the business is going, and there's not communications, and there becomes mistrust between the generations, unfortunately. And so there again, we just need to communicate. We need to let both generations know where we think this business is going and where we intend in our own personal life to go with the business. Okay. Equitable is not equal. Boy, I've covered this a couple of times already. I think this is just so important, and I think a lot of farm families struggle with this. I want to treat the kids all the same, but the reality is if the farm is going to survive, that just isn't possible. And oftentimes we do have some liquid assets. There's some stocks and bonds, some savings, maybe a couple of houses or something, some other ways that we can leave some of the other kids some of the other assets. But if there's one or two kids that have been on the farm for a good long while and been committed and put in the sweat equity, in my mind, they're the ones that need to inherit the farm. Equitable is not equal. Okay. Choosing a poor farm ownership. Well, back when I started, we didn't know about LLCs back in the 60s, and everything was a simple partnership at that time. But then we came into LLCs, and there's C corps and S corps. I don't get too much into those. I've run into them occasionally. They both provide liability protection, the same as an LLC, but a C corp is just unbelievably difficult to unwind. And I've got one now, a very large fruit farm, and the ownership of the business are all in their 80s and 90s, and the management generation has almost no ownership. So make sure you get the right ownership, and it's okay to have more than one LLC. I like personally to have an operating asset LLC and then a separate one for the real estate, and that just makes things a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier. I realize on really small operations this isn't possible and necessary, but when you do get to bigger operations, I do recommend that. And then joint tenancy is the most usual one with right to survivorship, so that, for instance, if the land is in the husband and his wife's name and the husband passes on, automatically goes to the wife. We get into kind of a messy situation if we do tenancy in common. So just be sure, and this there again, you need to have a good attorney and have them recommend what is the best uh, form of ownership for your farm. Okay, next. Allow the process to stagnate. Yeah, I've talked about this already. Just keep at it. This is one of those topics that it's easy to put off. Well, we'll talk about that next year. And then next year comes and nothing happens. So if we can work at it maybe this winter and get a good plan together, and then think about it over the summer, and then next fall when things kind of slow down, we can get the thing nailed down, get it put together. A lot of times it's 4 or 5 years, and we really haven't gotten the thing done, and we almost have to start from the beginning every time we go to meet with them again. So don't allow the process to stagnate. Do keep at it, and this keeps all parties have to be involved in this. So in order to make it work, okay. So, and this is an ever evolving plan. It changes. I mean, in my own circumstance, I was in with my father, and then my brother came home. We redid it then, and then my dad got out, and then my nephew came in, and then I got out, and so and now my brother is in his early 60s, and he's going to be changing again with his son. So it's something that it's not a one and done thing. But if you put a lot of thought into it, it can be and have a good plan. It can be an easy transition from one situation to the next. But don't think, oh, we've got that done. Boom. My wife and I just rewrote our will this past summer, I guess it was, and we hadn't done anything since the kids were little, and we had people responsibility to raise our kids. Well, they're all grown now and and on their own. So your will needs to be updated, just as though these succession plans need to be updated as well. So okay, and I think we are to the end. So yeah, I've covered this pretty fast at a high level. A couple of years ago, I took a course down at Penn State, and we spent 2 days on this topic and really didn't get very deep into any one area. So there's a lot of time that can be spent, covering this area. But I hope this gets you to thinking. There's no time like now to get started on this. The earlier you can start, the better. And fair is not equal. And so that's another big point. And I hope I've stirred some thought, and will initiate some activity. So I'd be glad to answer some questions if there are any.
Thank you so much. I'm going to end recording.